Here's my take. This is a sad week for America, one of the saddest that I have ever witnessed. First, a series of bombs directed at a former president and other public figures. Then, an act of horrific terror in a house of worship. We seem to have crossed lines and broken barriers of decency. The attack on the Tree of Life synagogue strikes me as particularly tragic. One of the most extraordinary features of modern American life has been the integration of its Jewish community. For over 2,500 years, Jews have been vilified and persecuted everywhere. And then came America and Israel, two places where Jews could breathe easily and live safely. In turn, in this country, Jews have been deeply patriotic and productive Americans, scaling the heights of achievement, but also becoming civic leaders, philanthropists, and good citizens. And yet, we have seen an unmistakable rise of anti-Semitism in recent years. Now this. What does it say about America? The two events of this week are quite different, and most importantly, let's be clear, the responsible parties for the violent acts are the people who perpetrated them. But they have taken place against a backdrop. First, there's been decades of increasingly heated and nasty political rhetoric. People are moved to action by what they believe, by the words, thoughts, ideas they are surrounded by. John Maynard Keynes once said that madmen in authority who hear voices in the air are distilling their frenzy from some academic scribbler of a few years back. And Donald Trump has spoken harshly about his opponents, but he has not had a monopoly on this kind of talk. Democrats have done their share of demonizing. Now, I think this particular story does have a beginning, at least in the modern era. It's well told most recently in The Atlantic by McKay Coppins. In 1978, Newt Gingrich, a fiery young congressional candidate from Georgia, explained to a group of college Republicans what he called one of the great problems we have in the Republican Party. We don't encourage you to be nasty. Coppins writes that Gingrich set out to remedy this defect, and when he made a push for a Republican majority in the House a decade later, he sent cassette tapes and memos to party members across the country instructing them on how to speak like Newt. He suggested labeling the Democrats with words like sick, pathetic, lie, anti-flag, traitors, radical, corrupt. Since then, we have watched as politics has become more personal, nasty, mean-spirited, and destructive on both sides. The second feature of our time has been the toleration and encouragement of white nationalism. This is more recent, but it is indisputable. For example, when politicians from all parties and businessmen of all stripes condemned President Trump for calling some of the white nationalists in Charlottesville very fine people, quote unquote, they feared that he was tolerating precisely the kind of nationalism, hatred, and anti-Semitism that has burst forth this week. Finally, guns. When will we come to the blindingly obvious conclusion that too many people in this country have access to too many kinds of military-style weapons, which makes us unique in the advanced world? Will we really have to live in a country where schools, churches, mosques, and synagogues become armed zones? Fear, hatred, and division. Historians sometimes remind us that we've seen ugly times before as a nation. And it's true, the Alien and Sedition Acts, the first Red Scare, the Japanese internment, McCarthyism, all saw deeply divisive politics and incendiary rhetoric. But in all these cases, we looked back on the period with shame, as we surely will this one. And let's get started.